giving examples. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so I'm going to give examples, try and simplify things so that the viewers, the listeners can understand what it is that I'm trying to talk about. Now, if you look at my hand, this hand is in a straight position. Let's say this is a midline position, and this hand in this position represents a state of equilibrium or of balance. All of us know what balance means, all of us know what equilibrium means, and all of us try and get some semblance of balance, some semblance of equilibrium in whatever it is that we do in any aspect of our functioning. It could be a personal life, it could be our interpersonal or social life, it could be our occupational life, it could be the leisure activities that we do. We know that if we walk a balanced middle path, it is always healthier than any deviations or any skews to either side. So this equilibrium is the end result of homogeneous functioning of a lot of different electrical circuits inside the brain, or a lot of different neurological circuits. Now, let's say a person is faced with some challenge, some stressor has come up in his life, there is some adversity. The immediate effect of these events or these people, what I'm calling stressors, is that they affect the equilibrium. Otherwise, we would not say that there is a challenge. Now, when the challenge happens, the equilibrium moves a little bit to this side. Now, obviously, all of us are going to face challenges, adversities throughout our lives. The only time when there will be no challenge, when there is no adversity, when there is no stressor of any kind, is when we are dead and gone. I mean, for instance, the stones or the rocks outside my clinic right now, which are lying on the road, they have no stressors in their lives. They will continue to remain there. They've probably been there in one corner for the last 50 years. They will continue to be there for the next 1 million years, unless someone just kicks them away and they move from one position to the other. But as living beings, we do not have this luxury of being stress-free. So each time something happens, this equilibrium is disturbed. But because things are happening to us all the time, we are not constantly in this state. Because if we were constantly going to be in this state, then this is a state of malfunction or dysfunction. When that event happens, it disturbs the equilibrium to a certain extent, but there are inherent or inbuilt mechanisms, defense mechanisms, circuits inside the human brain, which will immediately get this back to this position. So the first event happens, the equilibrium is disturbed, the brain circuits, they kick in, we go back here. The second event happens, we come here, again the brain circuits kick in, we come back here. This is an ongoing process from morning till night, 24/7, day in, day out, week after week, month after month, year after year. These changes are taking place. And there is a word in English which also means the ability to bounce back. We call it resilience. The bouncing back that the human nervous system or the human brain shows when the equilibrium is disturbed or distorted or skewed is also called resilience. All of us have this ability of resilience or this quality of resilience. So let's say one event happens, the equilibrium was disturbed. If there were 10 people, the same event happened to 10 different people. Now, in all those 10 people, the equilibrium would shift. But would it shift to the same extent? Not at all. Because in some people, it would have this much of impact. Some would show this much of impact. Some people, it would show this much of impact. Some people, it might show this much of impact. And there might be people who do not exhibit any effect, any impact at all. So just for the sake of argument, I said there were 10 people, all of them showing a different impact. Let's say this impact was this much. Now let us find 10 people who showed this much of deviation in their equilibrium. Maybe they showed a deviation of 20 degrees. So if we find 10 such people, will all 10 people take the same amount of time, or will they need to put in the same amount of effort to go back to the midline position? Not at all. All 10 people will bounce back with different speeds, with different degrees of ease and comfort. And this is what I meant when Ajmain, when I was discussing the topic for today's webinar with him, that people react differently to the same situation. It is also possible that the same person might react to a situation with this much of disturbance in the equilibrium today, but if the same thing was to happen to him a month later, then the amount of disturbance would be this much. If it happened to him a year later, it would probably have brought him here. So this shift in the equilibrium which takes place is actually what we call stress. Stress is not what happens to us. Stress is the change in the equilibrium or in the state of equilibrium that every individual exhibits. The event that is happening, which is causing this distortion or this skew, that event is only a stressor. It is not stress. And when we say that different people react to different situations or the same situation in different ways, that means different people get stressed to different degrees. The key to understanding why this happens, the key to understanding how we can alter our responses, how we can alter our mechanisms, lies in understanding this movement. To understand this movement, this bit we have understood that the equilibrium was disturbed because something happened. Now, it is almost as if inside the brain there is a very thick rubber band or a thick spring which is attached to the backside of my hand. When the stressor causes the equilibrium to move like this, the rubber band causes us to try and start coming back. So the equilibrium shifted, either the rubber band or the spring, they kicked into play, they tried to get us to come back to this position of equilibrium. Now, what are the situations where this equilibrium will not come back so easily? I can think of three situations. One is that the event takes place, the stressor which takes place, or the adversity or the challenge that we face, the magnitude is so immense that no resilience can cope with it, and you immediately come like this. So the equilibrium can be disturbed either if the magnitude of the stressor is large. It can also be compromised if this rubber band or this spring is inherently weak. If it is weak, then it will take a small amount of stressor to overwhelm the strength of the rubber band or the spring and cause this shift. And the third, obviously, is that it could be a combination of both. That the magnitude of the stressor is large and the inherent resilience that the person has is weakened. Even then, this thing would happen. Why is it that this resilience or this rubber band or this string is different in different people? There are a lot of factors for this. The most obvious, the most logical factor is that all of us, we inherit our genes, we inherit our genetic makeup from our parents, from our grandparents, from our great grandparents. It's a family tree, and genes keep flowing down from one generation to the other. And there are genes which determine how resilient any one individual is going to turn out to be. I mean, during childhood, during adolescence, during early adulthood, late adulthood, old age. So the genes are determining the amount of resilience that we have. It could be the result of hormonal factors. It could be because of some illnesses that we have experienced. It could be physical illnesses, it could be psychiatric illnesses, it could be a chemical imbalance inside the brain. All these things are affecting the strength of the rubber band or the strength of the spring. These are the biological factors, the genes, the hormones, the chemicals, and so on. There could also be things that have happened to us in our lives, what we call the events that have taken place in our lives. People face a lot of abuse, people face a lot of trauma in their lives. The hallmark of all such events is that they start eroding the strength inside the resilient circuits. So where there is a history of such events in a person's life, the chances are that his equilibrium is likely to shift more easily and go back with greater difficulty than if that had not been the case. So there are biological causes, there are Environmental causes, for me, when I use environmental, I'm talking about the external environment, things that have happened to us as we've been growing up. And when I talk about biological causes, I'm talking about the internal environment of that person. So it is an interplay between the internal environment and the external environment. And this is the key to understanding how people cope differently. And once we have understood this, this is also the key to understanding how psychological and psychiatric disturbances they come into existence. Now let's look at any individual's lifespan. Things are happening all the time. The equilibrium is shifting. The resilience gets you back there. You stay there for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a few weeks. Then the next event happens. Your equilibrium is disturbed again. Resilience kicks in. You come back here. But like I said, maybe there was one big event that took place which caused a distortion. There could also have been a series of smaller events which happened with great rapidity. And each time that they happened, the equilibrium would come here, but the resilience would get you back only this much. And then the next event would come, it would distort the equilibrium more, resilience would get you back only here. So even a series of small events would be able to cause this distortion. And of course, if there are inherent deficiencies in the resilience, then that's going to cause this shift. Once this shift has happened, once the equilibrium is in this state, this gives rise to one of the two commonest problems or one of the two commonest disorders that all human beings face. We are not talking only about psychiatric problems here as opposed to cardiac problems or gastrointestinal problems. It is known, it is a fact that psychiatric illnesses, in terms of sheer numbers, in terms of incidence, in terms of prevalence, they are far, far more common than any illness which could affect any other organ system inside the human body. So when the equilibrium is shifted this much and it stays here, this is loosely what we would call a state of stress or anxiety. If someone says, I'm feeling very stressed, what actually has happened inside the brain? His equilibrium has come here. He's feeling a lot of stress, he's feeling anxiety, he's feeling a lot of tension, he develops apprehensions, he develops phobias, he starts to panic, and so on. And each of these words that I've used each of these words is probably typifying one specific disorder that a psychiatrist would be treating, or millions and tens of millions of people all over the world would be facing. So long as this equilibrium remains here, you are having these problems that I mentioned. Now, either the human being or the brain does something to get the equilibrium back here. If this happens, you're back to being good. But if you stay in this state for a long enough time, your stressors are continuing, your adversity is continuing, your coping strategies are becoming more and more weak. What could possibly happen would be that the equilibrium starts shifting like this. And this, in a way, is what, to me as a psychiatrist, would represent the state of depression. Now, depression is when the equilibrium is here, which means there is a much greater disturbance in the equilibrium, and this state is anxiety. And if we put anxiety and depression together, I mean, as a clinician, I would call these anxio-depressive disorders. For me, the commonest problems worldwide today, it's almost considered to be the common cold of major illnesses, is this spectrum of disorders which are called anxio-depressive disorders. They are responsible for more ill health, more unhappiness, more morbidity, more loss of productivity, more absenteeism, possibly more mortality than any other single disorder which could affect or afflict any single organ inside the body. So this is anxiety and this is depression. I'll just take out a rubber band and I'll show you something. Now, you see this rubber band. This is the normal state of the rubber band, which I would say is the state of equilibrium. The normal size, normal tension in the rubber band. Now, if you stretch this rubber band, what will happen? If I if I use my finger and move it even slightly, the rubber band starts to make sound and it starts to vibrate. And in Hindi we say, uski nasein khichi hui hai. जब नसें खिंची हुई हैं, what does that mean? That person is anxious or he's stressed or he's tensious, or he's anxious or stressed or tense or apprehensive or phobic. So this is a state of anxiety. This was the state of the normal rubber band. Now, when the rubber band is in this state, I do this, the rubber band will make 2 or 3 oscillations. There are hardly any sounds that are produced, and very quickly it comes back to its state of equilibrium, to its resting state. But when the rubber band starts getting stretched, when the nerves start getting stretched, जब नसें खिंचने लगती हैं, this is the state that happens, and you can hear sounds, and the things keep vibrating. So a person feels as if he's walking on a razor's edge. He's constantly on edge. There are tremors, there is tremulousness, which in a way is what we are seeing here. Now, if, like I said, if the person stays in this state for a long enough time, what is happening to the rubber band? If this rubber band is pulled for a long enough time, what will happen? If the pressure continues, one possibility is that the rubber band will snap, it will break, which in colloquial terms or in layperson's terms would be similar to a human being having a breakdown. The other possibility could be that if I keep this rubber band stretched like this for some time, if I leave it then, what will happen? It becomes loose and limp like this. And this is the state of depression that I have described. If we understand this hand equilibrium example, and if we understand what I have tried to exemplify with this rubber band, we come very, very close to understanding most mental health problems that afflict human beings. So with this as a background, let us see what the common problems are where mental health is concerned. Let's look at anxiety in a lot of different formats, in a lot of different templates. The inherent feature of anxiety is this feeling that something is not right. The feeling that something is going to go wrong. So in my clinic, people who come to me in my clinic, they ask me, and I give this answer maybe 10 to 15 times a day. People say, Doc, I'm feeling anxious, but what is anxiety? The simplest definition of anxiety that I can give is that anxiety is meaningless anticipation. Anticipation is a bhavishyavani kar rahe. You are thinking about things that are going to happen in the future. Meaningless, as the word denotes meaningless, there is no meaning to this anticipation. It is known for a fact today, it has been based on a lot of research, a lot of studies involving thousands of people, which have happened in the last several years, that most things that people worry about are things that are never going to happen. And so we call it meaningless anticipation. But because the rubber band is in this state or the equilibrium is in this state, the brain in a way is conditioned to believing that something bad is going to happen. And in worst case scenario thinking, the brain starts believing that if I'm having a headache, I must be having a stroke. Having acidity, I had chola bhatura for lunch. There is some regurgitation, some reflux happening, some discomfort in the lower part of my chest. But because I'm an anxious person, my brain will immediately say, oh, I think I'm going to have a heart attack. I must rush to the hospital. So this is what we call worst case scenario thinking or catastrophization. You are thinking of catastrophic eventualities, which again is covered by that meaningless anticipation that I spoke about. A lot of people have a lot of anxieties. Now, we are living in times of COVID. We have been told we must keep washing our hands. Washing our hands is not something that was invented in the last 7 months. I've been a scientist for over 30 years now. One of the commonest disorders that I see is something called obsessive-compulsive disorder. What is an obsessive-compulsive disorder? To understand this, we need to understand two terms. One is an obsession, one is a compulsion. Obsessions are thoughts or images or impulses that arise inside a person's head. Let's say we talk only about a thought. So there is this thought inside my head that my hand is dirty or both my hands are dirty. And if I eat food with dirty hands, I'm going to infect myself. So a normal person, what would he do before a meal? He would go. Someone like me would probably not even bother to clean his hands. A lot of people would go to the wash basin, open the tap, just for 5 seconds, run water over their hands, and they are good and set. But a person who has OCD, oh, okay, in in between, there are people who would go and dutifully pick up some bar of soap, or there is a bottle of liquid soap, and they wash their hands reasonably well, clean, and they are set. But there are people, and it's a very, very large percentage. I mean, it could be in terms of 3, 4, 5% of the world's population, which means we are talking about hundreds of millions of people who feel that the hands are dirty. They will go to the wash basin, they will open the tap, they will pick up that Lifebuoy or Dettol soap cake, they start washing. And this process, I have seen myself in my clinic going on for 45 minutes, 1 hour, 1.5 hours. दिमाग में वो तसल्ली नहीं आती. They are unable to convince themselves, or they are unable to convince their brains that I have cleaned enough. Now it is okay to rinse my hands and wash off. In its more bizarre forms, what happens is the thought remains that my hands are not clean. So I keep doing it. I keep doing it over and over again. The water is running. I mean, if you have a 1500 liter or a 2000 liter water tank on the top of your house, there are so many patients I've seen whose family members are fed up. They say we have no water even to wash our own hands, because he or she makes sure that all the water runs out several times a day. So what happens is this person is washing, goes on washing, rinses his or her hands, and then closes the tap. And all of a sudden, the brain sends out a signal, oh, you touched a tap which was dirty and your hands have become dirty again. So you start washing all over again. This is classical anxiety. This is one of the most classical manifestations of an anxiety disorder. Then in anxiety disorder, you have phobias. Phobias are irrational fears. I'm going in a lift. What if I get stuck? What if the electricity goes away? I'm sure I will die. Let me not go to crowded spaces. What if I have a heart attack? I will not get medical assistance. What if I take a flight? What if I'm midair and something bad happens to me? Some medical problem happens. I will not have any medical assistance available. So these are all different forms of phobia. So there is claustrophobia. There is agoraphobia, which is fear of being out in open spaces in crowds. Then there is acrophobia. There are people who are very, very afraid of going up to any heights. I have been treating people who are afraid of taking escalators in shopping malls, because when they're going on the escalator and they feel, if I go up to the third floor and then look down, what if I fall down? These are phobias, irrational fears. People can have panic. Panic or a panic attack is intense anxiety. You are like this, suddenly your anxiety spikes up within a matter of a few minutes. You have palpitations, which is a sudden increase in your heart rate. You start choking, you feel that you cannot breathe, so you start taking breaths like this because you feel that there is some obstruction here. Your stomach starts feeling funny, your hands, they start trembling, you start having pins and needles, you feel that you have changed as a person, you feel you're going crazy, you feel that you're going to become mad, and you might feel that you're going to die because of what is happening. These are what we call symptoms of a panic disorder. So these are different manifestations of anxiety disorders. Of course, there are many, many more varieties of anxiety disorders, but it's not possible to cover all of these. Then we move to this state of the equilibrium where the coping did not happen well. This state of depression, the cardinal symptom of depression is a persistent low mood, persistent sadness. This coupled with a symptom which is called anhedonia. Anhedonia means a lack of interest or a lack of pleasure. Things which would be interesting to you earlier, things which would give you a lot of pleasure earlier, you stop wanting to do those things. So when the person is in this state, there is a persistent low mood, you feel like crying without any evident reason. बोलते हैं मन में रुलाई उठती है, your eyes are constantly watering because tears are forming for no reason at all. This coupled with the lack of interest, lack of desire to do anything, is almost diagnostic of depression. But once these things have appeared, your sleep starts getting affected, your appetite starts getting affected, your weight starts getting affected, you cannot take decisions easily, you cannot concentrate on what you have to do. These are some of the basic symptoms of depression. And then as these things progress, your brain starts looking at the future, and the only thing that it says to itself is, oh, my present is horrible. I'm sure my future is also going to be equally bad. What we call hopelessness, that things are never going to get better. When you look around yourself, you develop a tendency to compare yourself with people around you. And in that comparison, you come out inferior in the process. So when you're looking at the future, which is hopelessness, when you start comparing yourself with people around you, coming out inferior, that is what we call feelings of worthlessness or feelings of inferiority. Then you feel trapped. I don't know what to do. I do not see what I can do to get myself out of this situation. This is a feeling of being helpless. So helplessness, hopelessness, worthlessness. These are three of the cardinal and most dangerous symptoms or signs of depression. Because if a person has hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, he's of any age, I mean, apart from being very, very old, if you're 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of age and in reasonably good physical health, you develop these things, the brain starts now the brain starts thinking this kind of life is not worth living. I mean, what am I living this life for? But if you are in reasonably good physical health, you are not going to die all of a sudden. And that is what gives rise to one of the things that psychiatrists are petrified of, suicidal ideation. That if this kind of life is not worth living, I'm not going to die a natural death anytime soon. Let me do something to end my misery. And this is what constitutes a true psychiatric emergency. I mean, in today's day and age, you look around you, you talk to people, you read, you hear, you see, everywhere there is a mention of suicide, suicidal attempt, or a successfully completed suicide. Suicidal ideation, the underlying cause in 90% cases or upwards of 90% cases is an underlying depression. A successfully completed suicide, the underlying cause in 95% plus cases is depression. And as I said earlier, a few minutes back, the combination of anxiety and depression is the most prevalent major disorder in the world today. And I think it's very, very important, very, very essential for all of us who are gathered here today, people who are seeing, who are watching, and so on, to understand what anxiety is, what depression is, what stress was, what equilibrium was, what resilience was, how the resilience can be overwhelmed by events that happen. Because if you reach this stage, you have to reach a person like me. It is very unlikely that when you are here, your resilience is going to kick in and you will come back here. Even when you are here and you have stayed in this state for a certain length of time, you will reach a person like me. Because even in this state, it is unlikely that your resilience will kick in and you will come back here. The thing to do is to make sure that you bring about the requisite changes in your lifestyle to strengthen your resilience, to make your rubber band stronger, to make your spring stronger. The stronger these are, the more difficult it is for challenges and adversity to overwhelm you. Now, people ask me, Dr. Chug, you said so much about resilience, blah, blah, blah. Now, you tell us what we can do to build our resilience. Now, we cannot change our genes, that is for sure. What we are born with is what we are going to die with also. Even environmental experiences, things that have happened to us, they've happened to us. We cannot turn the clock back, we cannot undo that. But what we can definitely do is we can change the way in which our brain processes events around us. The software of the human brain, I mean, the brain is like a laptop. I mean, I'm doing this webinar on a laptop. What is a laptop? The laptop is working because it has an operating system. There are softwares working. And because that operating system is there, because the softwares are there, that is why you are able to see me, I'm able to see you, and so on. You take the software or the operating system out of the laptop, it is just one khali dhancha of metal and plastic and and that's pretty much it. Similarly, the brain is just any other organ. But what differentiates the brain from the liver or the stomach or the pancreas or my knees or my thumb is the fact that there is an operating system inside the brain. There are different kinds of software packages which are working inside the brain. And it is these software packages which help us to process anything that is happening, either in our external environment or in our internal environment. Now, if there is a glass which is lying in front of me, there is a certain amount of water in it. If you have one kind of software, your brain says this glass is half empty. If there is a different kind of software, that software processes that impression or that image of the glass with water and says it is half full. The glass has not changed. The amount of water in the glass has not changed. What is different is the change in software. Now, if it is two people who are looking at that glass, one is saying it is half empty, the other is saying it's half full. That is fine. That's understandable. But what if you are that one individual who earlier used to feel that the glass was half empty, and today, through some restructuring of this software or what we call cognition, through some cognitive restructuring, you are able to start saying this glass is actually half full. The day you can start to do that, you have built up your resilience. That is one, cognitive restructuring. Then changes in lifestyle, people do not understand, people do not recognize how vital they are. But leading a healthy lifestyle is vital to healthy resilience. Sleeping on time, waking up on time, having a balanced diet with all the essential nutrients, micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and so on is very important. Having a fixed routine for exercise. It could be yoga, it could be meditation, aerobic exercise is very, very vital. Making sure that these are part of your, if not your daily life, then at least 5 days a week you are doing these things. Then the chemicals that you abuse. People do not recognize how much damage excessive amounts of tea or coffee would do to a person. I'm not advocating, that we become whatever. I mean, whoever does not drink tea or coffee. All that I'm saying is that you should start doing things in moderation. If you drink X number of cups of, let's say, coffee in a day, try and bring it down. If you smoke X number of cigarettes in a day, it's extremely unhealthy for your resilience. If you cannot stop, definitely try and cut down the amount of nicotine that's going in. The same applies to alcohol. It applies to any other chemical that anyone could be taking. These are some basic measures. People usually are dismissive about these because they do not recognize the significance of these steps, which, if incorporated into our daily lives, how much change they would bring about. And so people, I mean, they just say, blah, man, forget it, I'll do it tomorrow. But each day that goes by is probably making that rubber band maybe 1 millimicron weaker, or the spring 1 millimicron weaker. And when those millimicrons start merging into each other, then the resilience actually starts taking a hit. And if the resilience starts taking a hit, you start becoming more and more vulnerable to events overwhelming your resilience. Ajmer, I think let me stop here, and I would be very happy to take up questions now.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a brilliant session, and every day is a learning. And with every webinar, we are getting to learn new things. And rightly said, we all have this quality of resilience, and idea is to strengthen this resilience. Now, a couple of questions, sir. Like you mentioned about anxiodepressive disorders and panic, anxiety. And very often, we experience this, especially, we have sedentary lifestyles, and then, some of us are like working 24/7. Here, the pressure of job, it kind of takes a toll on your health, and so we experience this condition burnout, where emotionally, physically exhausted. How do you deal with this kind of condition, sir? I mean, of course, you mentioned about changes in lifestyle, but especially this burnout and city life, and we do experience this.
Ajmer, burnout is this state. When you are in a state of burnout, you are already here. You already need someone like me to help you. The aim, obviously, the best treatment for these things is preventive. Because once you have reached here, whatever designation you have reached, whatever money you have earned, whatever power you accumulated in your life, it is not going to make you a happier person. Because this state of depression is the exact opposite of happiness. I have seen countless numbers of, senior corporate honchos coming to me saying, Doc, I don't know why I did this. I made a mess of my personal life. I made a mess of my family life, my health. I mean, at the age of 45, I've had 2 heart attacks. I've had bypass surgeries. I've had stents. I have high blood pressure. Why have I done it? The problem is that it is too late. Human beings, as a norm, they have a problem of unrealistic expectations. Especially when it comes to themselves, a lot of people expect themselves to achieve beyond, go beyond, above and beyond really. And they are going to go into overdrive. If you have a candle which is supposed to last for 3 hours, you take a matchstick, you light the candle, it will last for 3 hours. But if you light that candle from both ends, how fast will it burn? It will finish in 1.5 hours. So what happens is candle burning from here, candle burning from here, when it reaches there, it burns out. Which is what the term burnout means. That you have burnt yourself from both sides and you have now reached the stage and your candle has burnt out.
Sir.
You cannot get a new candle in this lifetime. Aging essentially is a process of wear and tear. You know about chromosomes. We have chromosomes inside our body. One end of each chromosome is a thing called a telomere. Telomere, in a way, is like an hourglass. You fill sand in that hourglass. All that sand will empty into the other side in 1 hour. The telomere is what is determining the rate of wear and tear in the individual. You may be working very, very hard. You may become very successful very fast, make a lot of money, create a lot of wealth, property, blah, blah, blah. But the day your telomere is finished, your life is finished. And so my people have realistic expectations. When you have unrealistic expectations, you only end up creating problems. And that's what I would say to you.
We have had psychiatrists and clinical psychologists, addressing these webinars. And the commoners, what most of them suggested, as you're saying that, changes in the lifestyle, everybody suggests that, when we get up, that sense of gratitude and counting your blessings, it helps, which some clinical psychologists and psychiatrists suggested that, we begin our morning on a good note, a sense of gratitude. Like I read somewhere, I follow this Twitter handles, The Secret. It says that even if you give just 51% good thoughts and good feelings, you've tipped the scales of your life. But anyway, coming back to today's topic, now you mentioned about panic and anxiety. Supposedly we come across somebody, somebody's having a panic attack, and these days it's difficult to access hospitals and so what should a commoner do? How do we handle, somebody's having palpitations and anxiety levels really gone up? So how do we handle this kind of situation, sir?
Okay, you have mentioned the term panic attack. And your question is, if I'm walking on the road and I come across someone who's having a panic attack, how can I help them? Right? Let me replace the word panic by heart. If you come across someone who's having a heart attack, would you be asking this question?
No, I will not. I'll rush him to hospital.
So how is a psychiatric illness any different from any other illness? You will rush him to hospital because you understand and you recognize that this problem is beyond you. It needs specialized care.
Okay.
The same thing applies to this. The problem in our country is that because of misconceptions and myths around psychiatry, psychiatric problems are probably the worst treated illnesses in this country. Because everyone is a self-styled psychiatrist. It is, a term which I'm very fond of using is armchair psychiatry. You're sitting in your drawing room in your armchair and you pretend to know everything about everything. If you talk specifically about panic attack, you meet someone on the road having a panic attack, you do nothing, in 10 minutes the panic attack will be over. But that is not the treatment, because a person who has had one panic attack is likely to have another panic attack in the next few hours, next few days. So he needs proper treatment. You are as equipped to handle a heart attack or a stroke or a cancer as you are equipped to handle a psychiatric illness. Now, in our country, the problem is, like I said, the stigma, the myths, the misconceptions. Another huge problem is the lack of mental health infrastructure. Even if you want to take a person to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, there are several states in India where you do not have a psychiatrist. What would you do then? Okay. Then you will say, okay, now let me look for a psychiatrist in the closest district or in the closest big town, the town which is closest to where I am. And as a caregiver or as a well-wisher, you need to be supportive. The one thing that you cannot afford to do is to be dismissive of the person's problem, which most people do. Hey, come on, use your willpower, it will get all right. You're such a strong person. If a person is having pain in his chest, no one tells him, you're such a strong person, you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company, use your willpower, the pain will go away. But for psychiatry, this is the standard statement. Oh, you are an alcoholic, use your willpower, your alcohol addiction will go away. You are suffering from A, use your willpower, you get up in the morning, go for a walk, problem will go away. You have a glass of milk in the morning, have a glass of milk at night, your problem will go away. I mean, to me, it reeks of ignorance, stupidity, immaturity. I mean, any of these synonyms would apply.
I agree with you, sir. I mean, there is a huge shortage of psychiatrists, and plus, as you mentioned about the stigma. So here also, we are attempting to destigmatize it. We are attempting to, sort of reach out to people, and why is it that, I have to Google search for a, good psychiatrist around me? The way, physicians are available, there is a huge shortage of psychiatrists. Having said that, now in a family, we come across, at times the kids are withdrawn, as you mentioned the term anhedonia. So how do you deal with this kind of situation as a parent? When you suddenly notice that, the lack of interest in that kid, and also, how do you motivate, how do you persuade a person that, he or she needs to seek professional help?
Okay. First thing, let's say we're talking about a parent interacting with a child. What is the usual approach of a parent vis-a-vis a child who does not do his homework or who appears disinterested in studies? Hitting the child. I mean, somewhere some Britisher said, spare the rod, spoil the child, which is the biggest piece of nonsense I've ever heard. Parents will approach a problem with a positive attitude maybe once or twice. They will say, this is not working, so let me adopt the other approach. Let me start hitting my child. Why is it that you will give up a positive approach after 2 failed attempts and you will continue with a negative approach for the rest of your life? Why is it that after 2 failed attempts at hitting the child, when the child is not becoming more interested or becoming more motivated, why is it that you don't realize that this approach is not working? Let me think of a third approach. It boils down to ignorance.
Okay.
Again, it boils down to the fact that the parent considers himself or herself a hotshot child psychiatrist. I know my child, I am the mother, I am the father, I know how to deal with the child. You will do everything wrong that you can do, but you will not do the one right thing, which is to take proper help. I'm not advocating or promoting psychiatry here. I'm just telling you that, you will take a child who has a problem in the heart to a heart specialist. If there is a problem somewhere in the brain, eventually the brain is what controls your behavior. It controls your thoughts, it controls your emotions. And psychiatric disorders essentially are problems in one of these 3 areas. It's either a problem in your thought process, or a problem in your feelings or emotions, or a problem in your behaviors. So for all of these, you need, I mean, let's say the child is refusing to go. Most children would finally go because the parents are insisting. One adult trying to take and another adult to a psychiatrist, a lot of adults would not agree to do it. Then you go to the doctor, discuss the symptoms, try and understand what the problem is.
Okay.
See if the doctor can suggest some measure in which you can help the patient.
Right. Jilendu, are there any more questions? Because Sir has to go for another session.
As you can see, I think very, very passionately about this. So whenever I get a chance, I generally take off, hoping that somewhere, it's going to make some sense to someone.
Okay. I'll ask one. Sure.
So if one such, I mean, this is a fantastic initiative by NPC, and you are very closely involved with this. If each such webinar can help one person and one family, I think we've already achieved the purpose. Anything more than that is a bonus.
In fact, to share one anecdote, one of my colleagues shared this message. She has been watching our webinars on mental health, and so one of the doctors said that seeking help is brave. It's being brave. So I got this message saying that you have saved one life because this girl, after watching this webinar, decided to seek professional help. So I mean, that was a huge compliment for us, saying that you've saved one life. So you're right, even if we are able to save one life, able to persuade somebody to see a doctor, seek professional help, I think a job is done. So.
Absolutely. I would agree with that completely.
So on Jilendu, if there are no more questions, can we close the session?
I think he's there.
Is he?
I'll take up on behalf of Jalendu. So we have few questions here. One question is, do medication really help in depression or only counseling help?
No, medicine is probably one of the key pillars in the treatment of depression. You start the right medicine. I mean, let's say someone goes for therapy. In a lot of cases, we'll find that the therapy is not working. The therapy is hitting a roadblock. And the person is put on medicine, and the brain, some changes take place inside the brain, chemical changes, electrical changes, magnetic changes, and that same person becomes much, much more receptive to the entire process of psychotherapy. I mean, if someone makes this statement, I would say that it's completely incorrect.
So another question is from Miss Jaya. She is asking, my daughter is in 12th and she is taking a lot of stress and she has given up eating and vomits out everything. What can be the reason? And how can I help her?
The reason is the stress. I mean, that is very evident. If a daughter is in this position, which is what I've been talking about all along, when you are in this position, your sleep is affected, your appetite is affected, your weight is affected. There are problems happening inside your stomach, there is acidity, there is reflux. So the symptoms that she's describing are the symptoms of stress. And the treatment is, again, I mean, I'm sure as a mother, she has tried a lot to explain to her child how, your board exams are not the be all and end all of existence, and there is much more to you than the marks that you get in a board exam. For a lot of children, these statements make a lot of sense, but there are still some children whose equilibrium instead of coming back here, it stays in this state.
Okay, sir, another question is, please throw some light on dementia of 90-year-old.
I think someone needs to switch off their mic. Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Sir, please throw some light on dementia of 90-year-old.
Now, I used a term called wear and tear. As you keep growing older, let's say a person has been walking, running, his knees start getting affected. He has arthritis and he can barely walk, forget about climbing stairs. So that arthritis is a manifestation of the process of aging. You develop a cataract in your eyes, your blood pressure goes up, and so many other changes happen. Similarly, these wear and tear changes, they start happening in certain structures inside the brain. When wear and tear changes happen, what actually is happening is that parts of the brain, they start to atrophy. Cells start to die and new cells are not formed. And this is what we call a state of dementia. It's disorder. Dementia typically involves deterioration in the functioning or degeneration of certain parts of the brain, which are primarily controlled with the memory function. And so people who have dementia, they cannot recollect things that have happened a few minutes back, a few hours back. But at the same time, their distant memories start becoming very, very vivid. So there are problems with memory, there are problems with judgment, there are problems with behavior. I mean, for me, it's a full syndrome. It is not an isolated disorder. And dementia even in India, the percentage of population that is above the age of 60, 65 is at an all-time high now. And so dementia is also at an all-time high. Ajmer, one last question.
Okay, sir. Last question is how to deal with situations when the expectations are not unrealistic. Is there a way to process these emotions?
When the expectations are not unrealistic, what is an unrealistic expectation or what is a realistic expectation? An expectation which can be fulfilled is what we call a realistic expectation. An expectation which cannot be fulfilled is by definition unrealistic expectation. Let's say I expect Ajmer to come with me to the gym and pick 50 kgs weight. Now, if he's a fit person, he will do it effortlessly, and we'll say it's a realistic expectation. But if he's not fit, if he's not that good looking, tough sir that he is, then maybe he'll not be able to pick up more than 15 kgs. And so the thought of picking up 50 kgs or 40 or 30 kgs is completely unrealistic. So for me, realistic and unrealistic are not dependent on the nature of the expectation. These two terms are dependent on the potential for fulfillment of the expectation.
Thank you very much, sir. Kalpana, Dr. Shuk has to go for another event, and thank you very much, sir. The word you used, resilience, so we can all bounce back, and so as you suggested, sleeping on time, and changing their lifestyle, and same time getting up and going off to sleep, yoga, aerobics. So that's the mantra of life. My immense gratitude to sir. Thank you very much, and we will bother you once again. But you have made my day by saying a tough study. Thank you very much, sir.
Good looking.
Thank you very much, sir. Gratitude, sir. Immense gratitude.
Thank you so much, sir, on behalf of National Productivity Council and on behalf of all the participants. Thank you so much for this wonderful session.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.